The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies with clouds of knowledge and love. And let them pour upon the earth, your disciples, a shower of rain, the teachings. I send forth this jewel mandala to you, precious Guru. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalagam Niradayami.
Sanji Danzo Ji Nam Da Shanchu Badu Da Ni Jasu Ji Dagi Chu Nye Ji Pesu Nanji Rola Ben Che San Ye Ju Ba Ju Che Danzo Ji Chu Nam La Shanchu Badu Da Ni Jasu Ji Dagi Chu Nye Ji Pesu Nam Ji Dro Lam Ben Che San Ye Ju Ba Ju Che Dan Zo Ji Chu Nam Da Shan Chu Ba Du Da Ni Ja Su Ji Dagi Chu Nye Ji Pesu Nam Ji Dro Lam Ben Che San Ye Ju Ba Ju
Namo Laye Kedan Lodani Jinge, Montada May Kenan, Roa Kunje Dana Jazamba, Tanji Kedo Daki, Chudun to What Danga to Jibu Chunga Tomo Laje, but the Sone, that Jibu Din Tomo Laje Rimba. What the Katule do are Takante. Jebendin dan chung kalo dembaji kura jota der dembaji sara yo armatu dembaji kura jota der madwa jebu chung donge da bakunju demba tu rabares neba juja jebendin de tele lode ane kasugure shiro shechewa indu donge chamuda kunju chamuda sul neba jong tu wares marba.
It's going to be a big day. So we've already gone over the medium scope or teachings of the small capacity, and we have arrived at the medium scope and realized and recognized the differences between the two. And when we look at the small scope and the medium scope, it's necessary for us to take also a look at the Four Noble Truths, because we see in the small scope the truth of suffering and the origin of suffering is something that is a little bit different than in the medium scope, because it's a much more subtle view of what the truth of suffering is and what the actual cessation is. So this actual subtlety of the cessation of suffering that the medium scope practitioner or the being of medium capacity strives for is much more vast than that of a small scope practitioner.
다 집에 중국도게 내 송고도게 마도 내반 중토고 말스 집은 딩게 되는 마다 하다 로아리 두기 동에 내반 중토고 말스 말베.
So a being of small capacity or a small scope practitioner renounces or wishes to definitely get out of the lower realms, whereas a medium scope practitioner desires to be free from cyclic existence altogether, or to renounce cyclic existence altogether.
어제 다데네 다 가정아들 다 집은 딩게 되는 동에 되면 그때 안에 지 동에 가이 동에 조상바다 안는 로아 리두게 동에 상바 어디서 걸로 로즈 신사버스.
So we've already gone over the actual truth of suffering according to the medium capacity practitioner, and we've looked at the suffering of birth, the suffering of aging, the suffering of sickness, the suffering of death, the 6 types of suffering, etc., and the different types of suffering within the 6 realms of cyclic existence. So we've already gone over what the truth of suffering is according to the medium scope practitioner.
어제 다데네 가서 그래. 동해지 주유 동해 차반 주예지 동해를 내가 좋아할 레라버스 나서 메세고 말에 안 돈도 줄래야 동해를 내가 좋아요어스 쳇다시마도 마든데 존소나 안 고소 가보면도 와서 어디 동해를 내가 좋아나 돈을 내가 좋아요어스.
So when we look at the 3 types of suffering, the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering, we can see that even the animals share in common with us these types of suffering. For instance, a dog can experience the suffering of suffering. So we can see that with our own eyes in the animal realm.
어제 다 동해에서 다 가서 TV에 나사당 가서 어디 걸 동해에서 되고 와르스 어디 동해에서 솔중소하는 가서 내반 중앙 레라버스.
And the suffering of suffering is the suffering one might experience when they are having illness or a disease. For instance, if that being has tuberculosis. So when one has sickness or illness, it becomes very easy for that type of person to renounce that sickness or wish to definitely get out of that type of sickness he or she has.
단 주유동에 내반 중앙 때서 가버렸어. 주유동에 땅 가서 구유도와들라 그래서 구유도와 상사르게 해비네 구유도와들라 주유동을 그래서 안에 그 주유동에서 로고가 가르스나 안에 도와들라 배주 제단에는 그 동에 자는 거랬어. 사부 자수는 가서 롱코다나 집도 왔어. 롱코 시체다나 영동에 정도 와. 그 도와도 전에 동에 자 동에 그러저도 거랬어. 저도 거랬어. 주유동에.
So the next type of suffering, the suffering of change, is a little bit more difficult than the previous type of suffering, the suffering of suffering, to renounce or to definitely wish to get out of, because this is cyclic happiness, or the happiness one experiences in cyclic existence, not recognizing that that happiness, whatever one drives for or strives after, always turns into some type of suffering sooner or later. So it's the misconception of cyclic happiness that makes the suffering of change so hard to renounce or definitely get out from. For instance, if one is very hot and they go into a room and turn on an air conditioner, he or she, for a moment, might feel much better because the heat has been dispelled. That person is no longer hot. But sooner or later, it might become too cold in the room, and then the person experiences suffering because of that change that he or she initially changed from that emotion that he or she initially experienced, which initially was happiness to cool off, but suddenly becomes suffering when he or she becomes cold.
다 주의 동에도 마당 되빌하다 안에 조건의 상대 담보 니바 송바바 되어와르스 송바 엔칠레 안에 주의 동에 되어 말스 쿠이도와 되어 말스 말베.
So when we look at the suffering of change, the human beings in the human realm have to experience this. Gods in the desire realm have to experience this. And even beings who are up to the third concentration level still have to experience this suffering of change. But once one has transcended the third level of concentration, or the third concentration level, then at that point, he or she does not have to experience the suffering of change.
다 쿠이도와 주의 동에는 아바 주가 상바데 남바 세고 말스 슈르바 안에 딩에즈 공기 세토부 줄래야 주의 동에는 아바 주가 상바 요아르스.
So when we look at this desire to definitely get out of this happiness, or the happiness of cyclic existence, we can see that this is not an exclusive concept within the Buddhist tradition. We can see there are many traditions that have various concentration levels that they can go through as well, various other religious traditions. So this desire to transcend the suffering of change, or the desire to definitely get out of the suffering of change, can be found in other religious traditions, not only Buddhism.
어제 도수기 띵에서 군에 띵에서 세토를 해온도 쿠이도와들 주연다네 네번 중네 안에 상대 제바 나바 상대 제바서 그러면 나세 상대 제바다 조멜 젠도와르스 상대 제바다 조멜 솔레 안에 쿠이도와디오 마레스 좋았다뇨.
So one can then engage in concentration, and then through this concentration or meditative concentration, he or she can arrive at the fact that there is a fault in cyclic existence. And then through recognizing that fault in cyclic existence, then he or she can renounce cyclic existence through that recognition. And then once that person achieves various levels within the concentration stages, then he or she experiences less and less of the various types of suffering. Once the fourth concentration level has been reached, then that practitioner is abiding in the formless realm and is no longer in the the realms below the formless realm.
어제 다 동에 차슈의 차반 뒤지 동에서 견들스 차반 뒤지 그 동에서도 간대질 자 오르스나 배낭 가서 새 집에 여봐 있나요? 조부코 안에 거부 차는도 가이 동에 레더 녀모 게누고 알스 안에 레더 녀모 오게 나용고 아래 롱아메비 폼보 어드니질라 레더 녀모 오게 종유 안에 가서 그래. 제가 저와도 내발로 롱아메비 동에들 차반 뒤지 동에서 그래서 차워서야 돼. 로아리 조갈 쳐도요스 다데 차반 뒤지 동에데 로아리 조갈 쳐도요서 차반 뒤지 동에스.
So the most subtle type of suffering that one experiences is the pervasive compounded suffering. The pervasive compounded suffering is the most subtle because this is what causes us to continuously have to experience unpleasant feelings. We might wish to experience pleasant feelings, but suddenly we have unpleasant feelings. We have no control or no independence from these chain of events that are taking place. We can't stop ourselves from getting old. We can't stop ourselves from getting sick. So this pervasive compounded suffering is the continuous rebirth in cyclic existence brought on by our karma and afflictions. And this causes us to be not independent and does not allow us to choose our rebirth. Our rebirths are all caused by the causes and conditions and our karma and our afflictions. So this is what is meant by the pervasive compounded suffering, and this is the most subtle type of suffering within the three.
왔다 차반 뒤지 등에서 답변나 가서 지 가서 그런 가서 지와를 가봐요 마트 라메 받지 용거스 게브 차알 되봐요 말스 이나 라메 바 게브 차는 거스 ane sheal dewa yo mare rangwa ma ba shin go re wa de sulle chaban du ji ding lo do res.
This pervasive compounded suffering makes it so we have no choice. We have no independence of. We have no choice whether we will get sick or not. We have no choice whether we will die. We have no independence in this situation because this is cyclic existence. So the pervasive, I forgot one thing before, in the Tibetan, the chapa, the pervasive, the meaning of pervasive is that one has to continuously turn again and again in cyclic existence. So that's the meaning, the etymology of the word pervasive in the Tibetan.
Oje tatne sande jebatan tenne zume ke hatu sule dunge yo maris yani ju dunge yo maris yina ya hatu so ne ya ko ne lege kaze pheja lege nyobat mazuba desi dul hatu degres lege nyobat zuzuna hatu so shin masa ayuris
There's something jibelena the masa
sande
drotudu.
jebaje ane zume yo wa tasul dunge dunge dan ju dunge yo maris
Yomare.
yo mare ina ko so sheya dan jiwa le ya dan wo gab chal rawa yo mare ko so ya leg ne ba se ndu ma sa
Then Yanjer, the May Dang Daoriju. Okay. So even if one is abiding in the formless realm and he or she does not have to experience the suffering of change or the suffering of suffering, they still have the pervasive compounded suffering. And when the potential or the power of the karma that allowed that being to be in that formless state, once they've reached the fourth concentration level, decreases or declines, then that being must fall to the lower realms and must have to then once again experience rebirth into a lower realms or human rebirth or any of the other types of rebirth that one takes within the 6 realms of cyclic existence. So even once one has reached that level of concentration and has achieved this formless rebirth or this formless state, it still does not make them clear from this pervasive compounded suffering that will force them back into the various other realms at some point in time or another when the power of the karma that allows them to abide in the formless realm is no longer there.
o tetabi dunge ne su de dunge ne su ne yana san tamba ina an dunge gabu me baje nganju ko samba le ngores da dunge de gabu nga dunge gabu me an dunge me pon gundo dunge pon bala dunge jo pon ngores ane leju kunjo do nyomo kunjo san tang ngores.
So once one recognizes the nature of suffering and recognizes what suffering is all about or its nature or its details, then one will start to see the faults and then renounce that suffering. And if one wishes to be free from suffering or definitely get out of suffering, then it's necessary for that person to find out what the cause of the suffering is in the first place. So he or she must analyze or engage in an analysis in order to find out what that causal factor is.
oje tatne sanje ge den waranasel chugu dombu ko den dunge babi dembo den kunju babi dembo den goba babi dembo den la babi dembo dunge sheba sha kunju bon sha goba ngo sha lang gong ba sha sa de sanje ge song de o ding ser sanje ge dombo ane dunge ge ne ju che gores dunge ge ne ju de she ne ane ti jo kunju bon gores sanje ge o de song yores.
So this is why the Buddha, at the first turning of the wheel in Varanasi, stated the Four Noble Truths. He stated that this is the truth of suffering. This is the truth of origin. This is the truth of cessation. This is the truth of path. The suffering must be understood. The causes or origin must be abandoned. The path must be ascertained and practiced, and cessation must be achieved. So this is what was stated by the Buddha at the first turning of the wheel in Varanasi. He was recognizing that one first recognizes, he was stating that one first recognizes the suffering, then he or she recognizes the origin, then practices a path that leads to the cessation of that suffering.
o dene jawa shamang be dati rebadle nene sheja neje jun ponjala dene toja mene temba shawa dar dunge jun tungu ba de jinla sheja ponja riba sheja temba jis jawa shambe nene dunge temba nasa da boris ne sapani da boris nene sheja dene ngasul nasa shungsuna nasa ka jud zaje don nasa ka jud bongurwa nasa ka jud jundabat kunjun de badres ane nasa de meba zebala ngaso dadal de mhen de gunbos mhen de ba shawateres lang gomba de mhen dan damores mhen dan damo ane mhen dan dai toni tu be shera lang do gomba ina tene dungen kale kale pontugres
Julama Dodejen, Gare. Dodejen. Julama. So one can find in the commentary to the Buddha's works, in the Uttara Tantra, or the Sublime Continuum by Lord Maitreya, a quote that says that the suffering, like the sickness or an illness, must be understood, and then one must figure out what the cause of the suffering is, and there must be an appropriate diagnosis of this illness. And once this illness has been diagnosed, then the medicine must be given, or the path must be practiced. And once the path is practiced and the medicine is taken, then this illness can be eradicated. So in Maitreya's texts, he compares the suffering, the actual suffering, the first noble truth, to the recognition of an illness or a disease. And the recognition of the origin, he compares to going to a doctor to diagnose a disease. And the path itself, he compares to medicine that one must take in order to eradicate the disease. And the cessation is compared to the cessation of the illness altogether, or the eradication of the disease altogether. So this can be found in Lord Maitreya's Sublime Continuum as well.
What the Atisha Landon, Sibi de la Joshushi, Dibi Lele Dudani, Kanji Ranjas Tandoni, Jebutin Dishas, Jibaris.
So here it says, those who seek peace for themselves alone, turning away from worldly pleasures and avoiding destructive actions, are said to be of midland capacity. So here, this is the meaning we find back when we go to the root text. This is the meaning of the medium capacity practitioner, the condensed meaning in the fourth stanza of the root text.
Tatane, Yeden Jujuman, Jebe Mungo Dungan Kunjuku, Yeden Maron Sibi Pansuji, Yemirin Tabi Dawala, Duni Chambu Javashinjulu. Nada somebody Tamba intent, Shajin Bayo Chambu, then be Tawa Susu Tabala, Druba Nebashiba Shinjulu, what to Suka Jiba in service.
So here we'll also look at the source of all my good. And we can see here it says, bless me to perceive all this wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful and to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddhist teachings. So here, this is the same as the fourth stanza of the Atisha's root text, because both of them are describing a medium capacity practitioner.
What that then Karasuko, Taba Dribble Langer and Telam Bebas, that head on Dai, Lankaran House Languaresana, Madan doing it to Sukolo Joe, laid on Yomo Bicunjula attention to Juarez. Yeah. Or a tag not to Dunga Judan Jabapum, but Tapang Guden Logres, Guden Dungan Gubi, Guden and Jonsuna and Jiburis, the Waris, Marba. That be Dunga Judan Jabapum being Guden to Susul Yuala, and then head on the Lankar Gongurusna, then not wanting to be Landan Lengos. Yeah.
So one recognizes that the suffering is caused by the karma and afflictions, and that if one could have a cessation of that suffering, then there would be some kind of happiness. Then it would be necessary for there to be a vehicle or a practice to get to that goal of cessation. So this is very similar to medicine. One takes medicine to achieve the goal of eradicating illness or having a cessation of illness. Likewise, one must practice the path. And what is the path? The path is the wisdom realizing emptiness. It's the recognition of the nature of reality. If one advances along that path of the wisdom realizing emptiness, he or she can arrive at the cessation and will no longer have to experience suffering and will be able to have happiness. And I previously forgot to say that the path was the path of the wisdom realizing emptiness.
Oji, that led on you, but so I thought Tatusuna Tenzin, denzil to the Docha Condro, the Monson on Tamul to the waters, the Mo Chuna deba Drubans with Denzin. Chuna deba Drubans with Denzin, the Lulu, Tion, Docha Jing Ware, Condro Jing Ware, Yomobache, Tion Lesane, Dory Lukudia, Gitawa, what the incidents.
So if we look for the root of this, if we try to figure out what the root of cyclic existence is, we can see it is grasping at true existence or grasping at true establishment. It's believing that things inherently exist from their own side that causes us to have all of the other mistaken views. So this mistaken view or wrong consciousness that grasps at true establishment or true existence creates the other types of afflictions and negativities, such as attachment and hatred. So we see that the third poison, delusion or ignorance, is the ignorance of reality or the mistaken view that grasps at true existence, which is at the root of cyclic existence, which must be abandoned.
That the visit the demo Garazana, Chugalo, da Oma Tanju Lojiba in a Drutama Jiwares, Drutama, Shidama, Dodeba, Sanzamba. Then Oma was Drutama Jiwares, Oma Bala, Omara Juba, the Tanju Ni, and then Drutaya should Oma Tanju Lodres, but then the Odrabadan, Gobulu Druta, Ayan de Wasu Tawade, Yajuris, or Tege, and then La, Karugongorasana, Chugalo, Tenderes. Daju tuzon la tun chuba shadare tende chugngolo tende yinza ane deba madruba res deba druba zimba dele ane tamu sagres lo jeres ti yonga ke nyomoje ti yonga ke lesa ne khol khude zawa dares an chuna deba madruba de sona deba druba zimbi denzil ne ndo gres nyembo ndo gres te yane ya do gomba yina donge jodam pombe thabat yongres marga what does it do?
So when we look from the perspective of the Madhyamika Prasangika view or the middle way consequence school view, because this is the highest view, it's not to say that there aren't other views. There are 4 tenet systems. There is the Great Exposition School or the Vibhashika School, the Sutra School or Sautrantika School, the Mind-Only School or Chittamantra School, and the Madhyamika or the middle way school. Within the Madhyamika, which is the highest view, there are 2 schools, the Madhyamika Svatantrika and Madhyamika Prasangika. The Madhyamika Svatantrika in English is called the middle way autonomous school, and the Madhyamika Prasangika in English is called the middle way consequence school. Today we'll be speaking about the view according to the middle way consequence school, which is the highest view, the view held by the great masters such as Chandrakirti and the great master Nagarjuna and Aryadeva and Shantideva. All of these beings held this highest view of the Madhyamika Prasangika view or the middle way consequence view. And what does this view state? What is its assertion? The assertion is that because all phenomena dependently originate, they necessarily are free of true establishment, or they are not truly established, or are not inherent from their own side. So it's recognizing this, that because they are not truly established, by recognizing that because they dependently originate, they are not truly established, then this serves as an antidote or an enemy to the wrong view of, or mistaken view that grasps at true existence, or mistaken view that believes that things or phenomena truly exist or truly established exclusively free of dependent origination. So the mistaken view here is that things truly exist. So according to the Madhyamika Prasangika view, things do not truly exist, they dependently originate. And once recognizes this, then these mistaken views can slowly be eradicated and liberation can be achieved.
Ta nga su du san tangwa ina nga wo nyaba nga su kangal duwas. Ai sayate, nga sayate, nga wo nga su kangal duwas. Ina nga de kariris, ngo de rebe, laba de rebe, kamba rebe, ndu tse suna, ane nga su, ngo de nga su nga maros, laba tang, kamba tang, pongpo nga rene, nga maris, pongpo nga tsuba deya nga maris. Pongpo nga tsuba la tuyne, nga wo nyaba sanlo, tsuba la tabi nga se kan yagu waris. Wade, pōmbōngā tsūpa la tūne tāpa mā yīmbi rāngōna chūpa shē sūna dēnzhēn rēs. Tē mā chūpa shē sūna Tenzin no
Less so.
Nyomul no Dongel no
Less so. So where is I? Who am I? Where is me or the ego? Is it in my hand? Is it in my head? Is it in my leg? Is there something exclusive of my 5 aggregates or my collection that comes together that is me? Where is the I? Can the I be found within the aggregates or outside the aggregates? Or is it a collection of both? And one cannot find the I when it is looked for within these parameters, within the aggregates or exclusive of the aggregates. So it's the grasping at the I, believing that the I inherently exists from its own side, exclusive of its collection of 5 aggregates, that is a mistaken view. The real view, the true view, the correct view is the view that the I comes into being through a collection of the 5 aggregates and is then nominally designated or named as this collection comes into being. So all of this collection of parts comes together to then be named this or that. But there is no nature of I or this or that in that being because of dependent origination.
다 주가르 있는 뛰는 주바 하는 was 뛰는 주바 안에 가서 예근데 제바 있나야 라바지고도 편리지고도 was 쇼고지고도 was 상루지 당고도 뭐뭐지 초발을 뛰네 이게 제바도 요거마도 초발라만 뛰비 이게 제바도 was.
So see, just the actual act of writing a letter requires many parts, many things to come into being in order for the act of writing a letter to take place. One needs to have a paper, one needs to have a pen, one needs to have a hand, one needs to have the intention to write. All of these things come together and then the act of writing takes place. But there is no writing that is exclusive of that collection, inherent from its own side.
되는 가서 모던 줘봐 있네 모던 줘서 랑가지고 모자고도 되는 콜로고도 땅해지고 뭐지 초발을 되네 모자 땅세야도 마도 용도도.
So when we look at driving, we must have a car, we must have wheels, we must have a road, we must have a driver. All of these things must come together in order for there to be any sort of driving or in order for driving to take place. There is no driving that is exclusive of these parts.
돈을 고아 차사서나 가를 산다와 이나 돈바니 산다하면서 제모도 내가 제나야 안 돈이 공도 그러었어.
So once one grasps or has a grip on emptiness, this can be applied to anything. Any kind of work one is doing, one can apply these same formulas.
되는 아주 춘대지 돈바 있나 돈아 가지고 오게 안지고 추고고 뭐뭐지 초발을 된 초동화도마도 초발을 마도비 초동화도 용음도 초대바마도 그랬어.
So just look at the act of drinking. It's necessary to have a cup and something to drink and a mouth to drink from and a throat for the drink to go down in order for drinking to take place. There is no drinking that can be found that is exclusive of this collection.
와 근데 산다네 근데 가서 그래 다 초동게 나데 랑원을 줘봐 점이 로데 로로시레스 대랑원을 줘봐 점이 로데 레소나 디용하게 된 뇌자도 공르지는 레사인 거라서 랑원을 마루바 고소나
So it's by believing that we inherently exist or we have some exclusive inherent nature that then is the wrong consciousness or mistaken view that then causes all of the other afflictions to take place. But if one then reverses that view and recognizes that there is no inherent or true establishment from our own side, then these afflictions can be lessened.
senzamba omana juba tuzuki kuyi zawade koal kuyi zawade denzin mariji orda denzin senzamba nemba juba yoares denzin lu shi mares shida ma ndodo basoge denzin lu den nemba juba yoares ladu gores ta kuyi zawade karesna kanza gda dru zimzin bas lu shi telite raba jiang gores
Umaran Jupa, the denzin.
Omar Jubi dancing killing, Chujaz killing, dancing the shitty log, Nudimain log, Nudimains. Kuiza Garas and a Kazak dancing the race.
Ah, like Ranjupa,
Ranjupa, Sensamba,
Denzin Yomare.
Shirama, Dudaba, Kuza Jibare.
So within the different tenet systems, there are views that there is true existence. The Great Exposition School asserts true establishment or true existence. The mind-only school asserts true existence or true establishment. The Sutra school asserts true existence or true establishment. And even in the middle way autonomy school, you can see that there is an assertion that the root of cyclic existence is not the grasping at true existence, it's the grasping at self. So even in the middle way autonomy school, there is a difference in opinion. The Madhyamika Prasangika view believes the root of cyclic existence is the grasping at true establishment or true existence, but the other tenet systems below that do not hold this subtle view. Autonomy school believes that the grasping at true existence is a much more subtle level than the actual grasping at self or grasping at person. So they assert that that is the root of cyclic existence. And the mind-only school as well asserts that there are things that are truly established, such as mind.
다 베지 가자가 단지 세계도 구수 베지 드니 산당 거스 다다 포문이도 모지레스 다다 포문이도 모 타디 산당도 거스 다다 포문인데 잡고 다다 포문이도 초동 오만 제버다 버스 모 지버레스 모 타디 마레스 졸레 동반이 제마이 동반일리 장 조제마이 셔러니 분도와 다다 포문이도 모지레 모 타디 마레스 이나야 안에 셔르바다 안에 가서 그래 시라마도 더 산삼 어라 주바 속에 안 귀 자와데 다도 보봉 다 되든 심비 다도 보봉 다 되든 심비 제바들 가자가 단지레스 대용어 그 레사는 코알 코데 귀 자와데레스
Then Tenjowa Gare Kelengdu.
오만 단주하게 되는 대답이 그저 단지라바다 킬레는 그래
다당 폼보 타데
오마데 모타데 다도 폼보 타데를 모 지바이라고 추동만 다도 폼보니도 통하면도와 모 지바레스 이내야 다도 폼보니 아니 모 타데바 다데 폼보를 온주자 어떤 점이 상로주아레스 어떤 가다가 단지서 그래스 대용하게 레사는 코알 코데레스 쿠이자테레스 So in
the lower schools, such as the Great Acquisition School, the Sutra School, the Mind-Only School, and the lower school of the Middle Way School, the Autonomy School, the belief is that the wrong view is that there is a difference between the self and aggregates, or person and aggregates. The belief is that it is similar to pouring water and milk together. They become of one nature or of one substance. So the mistaken view or grasping at person, according to these lower views, is seeing the self and aggregates as being two separate entities, whereas the correct view, according to these schools, is that one must see them as having the same nature. So this is the belief that causes cyclic existence according to the lower schools. They don't believe it's the grasping at true existence altogether, it's the grasping at person.
어떤 가서 로즈나 다든 그 뭐뭐시야 내 뭐뭐시는 뭐 통도 그래서 그자와 자단데 란주바 매치 지바레스 오만 단주가 그자와 댄진드레스 랑원 주반지 댄진드레스.
We could give a lot of explanation and go on, but I think it might hurt people's heads if we go through this. So I think it might be more wise just to say that the autonomy school of the Madhyamika and below all believe that grasping at person or self is the cause of the problems of cyclic existence, and the Prasangika school or the highest school believes it's grasping at true existence, and just dividing it like this might be fine.
어제 다 간데 다 오마 단주어들 고아차네 아부시다레스 추노 텐데레스 데모마루버레스 데모마루버들 고아야부치 상도 아부탄바이나 데바두바즘 덴진 너너그레스 타바 드마이마 셰소나 타바 드징 롤너노도와스 드징 롤너소나 오 드스저 시나도노도와 오든다부이서
연주스로낭 제이슨 네
추노 추노 데바두바즘 젠바 데바두바즘 덴진데 ane chuna deba madruba shesuna chuna deba druba zin denzin no ngres entedat puna taba dru mayin ba shesun taba dru zin lol no no do dru su jog nyame jiba do no dan dabores.
So it's very good if one can start to think about dependent origination and recognize that dependent origination must mean that there is a lack of true establishment or that things do not truly exist. It's once this correct view or non-mistaken view begins to come about that the correct views will come into one's mind. It's very similar to the wrong view of seeing a rope and believing that it's a snake and having all of this fear suddenly come, but then having a correct view come and recognizing that the rope is a rope and it's not a snake and it can't bite and there shouldn't be any fear there because a rope isn't a scary thing. So it's very similar to this. Once one recognizes the nature of reality and recognizes the lack of true establishment, then all of these other negativities go away. The nature of reality is understood and cessation can be achieved.
타바 드르든 제물로도 로로 제레스 타바 드르 마이베 제소나 안 드르징 로도 너노도와 로로 드르 마이베 제로도 로 덴바레스 드르징 로도 로 줌바레스 로 덴바데게 줌발 너노고레스 추나 데바 마루반 제로도 로 덴바레스 덴지 로로 제레스 덴소나 덴바데게 로 줌바 덴지 너노고레스.
So this actual thought serves as an enemy to this grasping at true existence, or as an opponent to this grasping at true existence. It's by recognizing this. It's by recognizing that this rope is a rope, and this is the non-mistaken view. The mistaken view that it was a snake. And once this mistaken view is eradicated in the realization that there is a rope in front of that person and not a snake takes place, then the fear is no longer there. Likewise, once the recognition takes place that things are not truly established, then all of the other negativities that ensue as a result of that mistaken view are lessened.
O tetabi toni de yana yana gomba ina kale kale denzi da nyomo ba da di intebu donge kale kale ga sona pon sona thaba sagete goden sagete lewo.
So once one familiarizes themselves with the nature of reality or emptiness and becomes more aware of this lack of true establishment, then this grasping at true existence is lessened, and the tama yanjursuranam. Tama.
다 추는 대바 마주바 대바 마주바 돈이 대안에 안에 산다바 있나 안에 갈래 안에 덴진 노노마 녀모긴 대보 동에도 갈래 pondu gores pombadil tabasir.
I only forgot like
the ponsona tento dewares.
So then the effect of this grasping at true existence will slowly be lessened, and one will not have to experience the results of it because the mistaken view is not there. So what the mistaken view is not produces cannot be produced.
어제 다 저번 드인데게 나론 집어 등에 보면 타버도 좋나 아니야 배상로 마도 세제 단지를 산요 말이스.
But this medium scope practitioner, or being of medium capacity, does not look towards other sentient beings. He or she does not look or care for others. The thought is to achieve liberation or nirvana for oneself alone. So this type of practitioner wishes to achieve liberation for his or herself and be there alone and have their own nirvana, but does not look to bring other sentient beings to that same place.
다다나 집에 되게 되네 가서 동행을 해본 중 요아르스 안에 나로 집 동행을 타나냐 배상로 되어 말스 나로 동행 되고면도 안에 세제 다지게 동행 되고 말에 세제 걸로 동행을 타와지 조나냐베 예엘메 예제다 세제 다지르메 잠바다 예주도 집에 첨부 상로 자쳐버스.
So then, when we move on to the great scope practitioner, they have a much more vast or a wider scope of thinking. The scope is much broader because, yes, they do have renunciation, the same as the other practitioner of cyclic existence and suffering, but they also recognize that other sentient beings are suffering and having to experience these pains. So recognizing their own suffering, they look towards other sentient beings and then develop love and compassion and a wish to bring them to a place beyond that suffering. And this is why it is called the great scope, because the scope of the thinking of this type of being is so much more vast, because it is not only focused on oneself, it is focused on liberating others.
다 집어 전부 jibu chenpo degi zu da shangchu ge sen lo shang wo marbe. Jibu chenpo degi shangchu ge sen zu shangchu sen lo shang wo res. Shangchu sen de teba chenpo jogo res marbe. Jawndo de nambi jogo re. Shangchu ge sen teba chenpo jogo res.
So if we're going to speak of the great scope or the great vehicle practitioner, it's very important to recognize that the root of the great vehicle is the mind that aspires to Buddhahood or bodhicitta. So this is the root of the great vehicle. The causal factor for being a Buddhist is having refuge in the three jewels. The causal factor for being a Mahayanist or a great vehicle practitioner is bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment.
다 jibu chenpo degi senjian tangche lo mimi nyeju gongo ware, shamba gongo ware. Ane nyeji senjian tangche en dowa lo goya dang, do ngay meba zoya ge. Ane jibu chenpi lang lo jangken so le sang lo zuo do te yo wares. Ane yen senjian tangche do ngay meba ane dowa lo goya dang, do ngay meba ane zoa la, ane dambo su sang ma je ba, ane kali ka wares. Senjian tangche ke do sanji gongo toba sha o nyabe. So
what is this thought? What is this mind that aspires to enlightenment? The recognition of suffering, the recognition that others are suffering, and like oneself, those other sentient beings do not wish to have suffering. They wish to have happiness, and how nice it would be to bring them to a place that was beyond suffering, that was in a place of happiness. How nice it would be to bring them to a state of Buddhahood, to a complete, unsurpassable bliss. But we recognize that we are limited, and at this moment in time we don't have the ability to bring all sentient beings to a state beyond sorrow, to a state of happiness. So then we must become enlightened, we must become Buddhas in order to have the capacity to do that. And then this is bodhicitta. This is the mind that aspires to enlightenment. This is what these thoughts lead up to. Bodhicitta is the result of this type of thinking, the thinking that looks towards others because of the recognition of one's own suffering and the wish to free those others from the things that you yourself do not wish to experience.
다 jibu chenpi lang lo jangbi sang lo du yuwa la chungu dang tumu wa dang din dang tumu yin lang jirinba zuli yabu shang wo res chungu dang tumu yin lang jirinba jiangzhu dang lende dang nyabu doji song yu sha dang je ya wo tu su le yabu cha song na din ka sang lo du ka le le wo sa res din ka sang lo du le song na jibu chenpi sang lo du ka le wa jing res.
So these are not exclusive scopes or these beings of small capacity. We say that these are teachings shared in common with beings of small capacity, shared in common with beings of medium capacity, because one must have all of the different thoughts within the different scopes in order to achieve the highest type of thinking. One must have the refuge of the small scope and the understanding of karma or action and its results, and the understanding of the necessity of confession or acknowledgement, and the understanding of the necessity of utilizing such things as the four opponent powers in order to purify. And once one reaches that level, then it's very easy to slowly move into the medium scope thought. So we can see how all of these scopes are necessary to have, and this is why they are called shared in common with.
chungo da tumu yin lanji riba dan, rin da tumu yin lanji riba dulu sal mamu tang da, di jen shen da ka le, jibu chenpu sang lu du ka le le wang jin sa.
So by thinking over the facets or factors of the small scope over and over again, and of the medium scope, and familiarizing oneself with these things over and over again, then one can reach the great scope or great capacity quite easily.
다 jibu chungo da tumu yin lanji riba dan, rin da tumu yin lanji riba du su kunga lo, jibu chenpi lanji riba ki jo res, jo. Jo dung ho da ma su na jibu yung wa kali ka wo res, du su zu san ya ba tang wo res.
So it's necessary, the reason we say shared in common with small capacity, shared in common with medium capacity, is because these are the causal factors for the great scope or the great vehicle. If there are not causal factors, an effect cannot be produced. This is why it's necessary to have all of these scopes in order to be of the great capacity practitioner type.
다 jibu chenpi lanji riba de da langzhen de ma dambu dudu jin ji she, dana ma jibu she wa res, jidu ni res, da dambu de ka to du ne she wa res. Raju to be doing it, Kanshi Jenji doing it, other Seba Kun, Jibutan Chuy, no, said the Jibuchi larger about Dunishivers, don't number. Dunishivers, don't never say it. Do Dujin Jishi, then the Mahamo.
So here, the first part where we've arrived at the great scope in this text is at 5. Those who, through their personal suffering, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity or great capacity. So here, this is a very condensed meaning of, or the first condensed introduction to the great scope practitioner, and then other things will be explained as this text goes on to enhance it.
다 라주 투비 동에지 가시 현지 동에 그 아다 세바 군는데 지부든 주인노 라주 투비 동에지 라주 투비 동에지 된다 가르서 거스나 안에 나로 안에 로아리 투 동엘가 가보메 동에지 동엘가 가보메 주유 동엘 가보메 차번 주지 동엘 가보요 말에 다술 타나냐 상롱 나롱도 나로 가보메바 나지 세제 다지 동에지 동에다 주유 동에다 차번 주지 동에다 어디술 가보요 말에 세제 다지 동에다 매바 주나 하냐베 상로 여행데 제부 첨부서 그래서 말에.
So here it says those who through their own personal suffering. So this is the meaning of this. Truly want to end completely the end of suffering of others. In the Tibetan it flows a little more cleanly, but it's through the recognition of one's own suffering, recognizing the suffering of suffering and wanting to be free from it, recognizing the suffering of change, recognizing the pervasive compounded suffering, and recognizing the necessity to be free from those types of suffering for oneself. Then the thought turns to other sentient beings and recognizes that all those other sentient beings, all the other beings, have to experience the suffering as well. They have to experience the suffering of suffering. They have to experience the suffering of change. They have to experience the pervasive compounded suffering. So then that type of practitioner then says, I would like to see all sentient beings, not just myself, be able to be free from these types of suffering. So here, this is why it says, truly want to end completely all the suffering of others are persons of supreme capacity. So recognizing their own suffering, they recognize that others suffer and then wish to free them because of their motives.
다간테 소술 산탄 소술 동해지 동해 주유 동해 제반도 유지 동해 로아리토를 쿠이 취도서 산도 못다네 대답이 안에 동해 대바도 군주 대바데 네 조봉에 매바주네 사지주 공부 도와샤 사지에네 세제 제다 걸로 안 동해 매바주기 도와는 거기 인야비 상로도 있어서.
So one starts to think about the suffering of change, the suffering of suffering, the pervasive compounded suffering, all of the different sufferings of cyclic existence. Then one will start to wish to get out very quickly from those types of suffering once one familiarizes oneself with all of these different types of suffering. And then that renunciation takes place, and then the thought about others takes place. Then the need to quickly become a Buddha, the thought that it's necessary to quickly become a Buddha in order to achieve the goal. And what is that goal? That goal is to be able to free all sentient beings from suffering. So this type of practitioner renounces cyclic existence, recognizes other people have the suffering within cyclic existence, and then looks for the fastest way possible to become a Buddha in order to help them. This is the abbreviated meaning of the great scope.
Yeah. 다든마 신전당바 상주준 더바지바 다달라 라마나지 템바이 하다 터네 셰바샤스 대답이 가서 그래 집에 준비 랑셰다도 셰발라니 셰바 당자와당 뭐 셰바 동문 자와사 다 집에 준비 랑제네 바 마제바 셰발라 사제니 용도니 셰바 당자와스 내 집에 준비 랑데 제부시에기스 켄렘바 셰바 당자와 안에 제부 준비 랑셰바 응원네 셰바 사진이들 사진이 데 견라림들 사진이 디자.
So in the sixth stanza, Genlam Rinpa, the commentator on this text, states that there are two sections of this. The commitment to compose or to explain where it says, "For those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by the spiritual teachers." So here it says, for those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment are those great scope practitioners. So here, this is what this is referring to. So, and here, it's not only that the promise to compose, but the promise, the second part, is the promise to compose it perfectly.
Senjen tamba shang chu chu, senjen tamba shang chu chu ndoba, senjen tamba shang chu chu sanji gubung marwe, sanji gubung roba, sanji gubung tuya ndoba yoba tedala, sanji gubung tuya ndoba sul yuware, teba shang chu senba sul yuware, teba chenpe rechen sul yuware, sanji gubung tubi ndoba de, teba chenpo yuware, te tabi sanji gubung tuba la, jutsu 타던 셔러가 좀 뭐 초발할 때는 산지 고모 토고로마도 주수 마성할 때는 산지가 갈리 가버려스 대답이 타던 셔러도 그걸로 라마나지 땡바데 능에 아디셔게 셰기스 what is wrong with that?
So here again, for those excellent living beings who desire supreme enlightenment, who are those? Who wants to become complete Buddhas? Who are those beings? Those are bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are beings who desire to become complete Buddhas for the sake of all sentient beings. So here, for those excellent living beings who wish for this highest enlightenment, I will explain these perfect methods. So the promise to compose and the recognition that the methods will be perfect because they will be the methods that have been passed down by the spiritual teachers and the perfect methods that have been passed down by the spiritual teachers. It's necessary to have both method and wisdom to achieve complete enlightenment or complete Buddhahood. So it's necessary to depend upon a spiritual teacher in order to know what that method and wisdom is. So once one depends upon a spiritual teacher, then the method and wisdom can be taught. So it's necessary to have the causal factor for the Buddhahood in order to achieve Buddhahood. If the cause is not there, the result cannot take place. So there must be perfect cause in order for the perfect result to take place.
다 산지 다 된다 도데 산지 고모 두번 되비 대바 쳔부솔라 안네 대바 쳔비 강사서 산지 고모 두번 되고 아래 산지 가부요 아래 산지 두알 되바요 아래 산지 토발라 안네 산지 두하게 주투스 고고 아래 주 산지 그 송요 아래 아디샤다 그러면 토멜라서부터 수고 송요 아래 더 수고 송바 나진데 안네 마송고 인송데 인사래.
So here it says, I shall explain the excellent methods of the Buddha, the excellent methods of a Sangha, all of these perfect methods that lead one to complete enlightenment. Because if one desires to have complete Buddhahood, then that desire itself is not enough. There must be a method to get to that. There must be causal factors for that. So here, the promise to compose according to the great masters has been asserted in the text.
어제 다 생지 응원시 받을 다 생지 응원시 받을 생지 봐 대전 생지 서고 말해 부드치다서 그러와 응원시 받을라 아니 대전 생지를 니 요아르스 현세던 주센스 니 요그르스 현비생 아 대전 생지를 니 부드치를 니 요아르스 현바 생지다 주바 생지니 현바 생지도 주바 생지니 아니 현세스 근데 현바스는 가지고 몰랐다 봐서 말이야. 세제 단지도 단지 공부 토바 샤오냐베. 아 현바든지 현비생. 현세던 조생이 제법 가르스나 샤주 생비 동바 마도 공게 대전 생제들 현세스 그래스. 샤생그 동바 토소나 되네 생제들 조비 센스 그래스. 샤주 생비 동바 유명기 차네. 아니 현세던 조생 샤 그래스. 샤주 셈베 도마 마투 공기 샤주가 센들레 부드치가들 면센 로그레스 샤주 셈베 도마 토자드 안네 샤주가 센들은 조센 로그레스 워드니 가레 마시기 유송고.
So when we talk about bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment, there are two types. There is aspiring bodhicitta, or aspiring mind that aspires to enlightenment, and engaged or actual mind that aspires to enlightenment. And what is the difference between these two? Aspiring bodhicitta is the actual aspiration to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. It's a wish. It's a wish or desire to become a Buddha. But engaged bodhicitta is the kind of bodhicitta that one has once one has taken the bodhisattva vow. And that bodhisattva vow is combined with aspiring bodhicitta. So actual engaged bodhicitta is bodhicitta that is combined or combined with the taking of a bodhisattva vow. So that's the difference between aspiring and engaged bodhicitta. The aspiring does not have the bodhisattva vow taken at that point.
Oh yeah. You doing okay?
I want to endure it to burn off some bad karma.
Okay. Yeah. That
Later, Dren. I'll talk to you.
Tijen senji ngone sheba. Tijen senji sheba. Ane senji ba na sheba tsuni la shoba tsuni. Sheba tsuni so na go tsuna she go tsuni sheba. Ane sha jong sa ji song yong song.
Yeshi sok sonangi sok.
Tsuni sheba. Tadagi shale shong sa ji wa den do. Ane gale shema de.
So then there will be next an explanation of the different kinds of collections that one must get, the collection of wisdom, the collection of merit, both of these types of collections that are necessary. So we'll slowly get into these other things.
Okay,
so if anybody has questions, if there's no questions, that's fine, we can end. If we have questions, we can go on. Whatever everybody wants to do. Sure.
What are the 4 types of giving?
The 4 types of giving? Jimba, the line is ji gare.
Jimba na jeta de chuji jimbas. Ngazu jen chuje ba de chugi jimbas
The first type of generosity is generosity of dharma. It's actually giving of dharma or teaching of dharma.
Chuji jimba, sanjing gi jimba sa na ngazu ji jala dan sa ya thon ate ba de sanjing gi jimba res.
Material generosity, when we give items or food or different types of things. The material generosity is the second type.
Menji bi jimbas. Menji bi jimba peji shamba gomba de menji bi jimba res. Shamba gomba. Senjen thajel min shamba gomba ina menji bi jimba yin song yo res. Yena chud su mbe na lu chud de sheda ji gdo de kale alen kansar ja ba ina menji bi jimba res. Zhong khan ne me de so sheda ji gdo na so ta tang ba ina menji bi jimba was.
The next type of generosity is called the generosity of freeing others from fear. For instance, taking a bug out of a water that's drowning, or saving or freeing a prisoner who's in a prison. So freeing a sentient being from a type of fear that he or she might have. So it's very similar to meditation upon love. So meditating upon love and the desire for others' happiness, that this type of generosity is characterized by.
Shambi jimba marwe. Shambi jimba shamba gomba injire.
Shambi jimba is jipa yimba.
Chuji jimba, sanjing jimba, menji bi jimba, shambi jimba. Jimba na je ta tu jins.
Then doing the gare, shambi jimba.
Shambi jimba shamba gomba tu jin do.
So the ngama chiran las on shamba gom. The
menji bi jimba
shamba gom.
Menji bi jimba se da sulu da tu injire. Chud mba khe ngo no namba tu se le kansal ja ba ina.
Okay.
Kul jiba me ba zo ba.
Less so.
Ani ya zhong khan de ke ma tu su tu da ba tu da ma da. O de so menji bi jimba injire.
The lapsar. Then shambi jimba, the jipa yimba. Okay. So the last kind is called the generosity of love. Now, previously when we spoke of love, we were speaking specifically towards freeing those from fear. So freeing, as was said before, a bug from the water that's drowning, or freeing a prisoner from a prison. So the last one is actual love, or generosity of love.
What the kind of vision is?
And I think it's this. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain the third concentration level, what that was?
What is the third concentration? The samten. the tambos nipa sumba jipa dondagarde.
Tenisa Tangasun de Ba Zume Kansung yours, Kansung. Nasu Jivalansa Kant the Sun yours, de Batangasun and Sundan, de Bihata Matul de Balagris, Desire on Marbe.
Less so.
Tene Pemera Marbe. Pemera the Zukan Lagris, Zukan.
Less so.
Tele Rinda de Jioris, Sandan Tambo, Niva Sumba Jivas, Jioris. Zu Pemera. What the ne Jioris, Tambo, Niva Sumba Jioris.
Then Zume Kam got to your je.
Zume can lay Jioris, Nakata, Najita, Jamis Jioris.
So the meaning of the concentrations is as follows. There are 3 realms. There's another, the translators note we say 6 realms, but we also say 3 realms. The desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. Within the desire realm, we have humans, any of the 6 realms. We have desire realm gods. In the form realm, these are beings that have reached certain concentration levels. There are 8 concentration levels. Excuse me. The form realm being is on the first 4 of these concentration levels that he or she goes through. They're just levels of more and more subtlety and concentration. And then one reaches the 5th concentration level, there's a formless state. And that level of concentration has the concentration like space. There's all these different names of those types of concentrations within the formless realm. So there are 4 levels. So there's 8 levels. There's something J.
Tatan Dobal Gabmebaje, Gunja, Doba Satua, Nemova, the Ida, Dobal Gabmeba, Juntane, Tazukan Santa Domini was on Balchin, Abashidan Dunan, Gunja, what the generals.
And so this being feels that there are all these downfalls within their surroundings and so forth, and then achieves various concentration levels and meditates over and over and again to be able to ascend, descend, ascend, what's up, ascend into the form realm. I always get those 2 confused.
But is it, as far as the different schools of thought,
Yep.
is it better to work your way up through like the lower schools up to the lower schools?
The Dutamawa Gariyakshu, the Tambo Shiramawa Lobjanshe, then the Dodepa Lobjanshe, then Semsampa Lobjanshe, then Umapa Lobjanshe, the Nyamdu Lobjanshe, Gariyakshu, Nampitsarpa.
Trutama Jantuna, Jika Jantuna Abris, Jika de Shirama Shin, Duduba, Ruru Shin Abris, the Nitama de Abu Bokuris.
It's good if you can go through all of them one by one and understand the first and all the other standings, because that will make your understanding of the final view real.
Yeah. That's Zumel Jin so Zuhal Gabu Maris, Zuhan Zugmi, Tunata, Reja, Tosul, Kusu Kabumabaji, Tosul Nabanjuan Gunjan, Zumel, Zumel Zuyo Maris.
So then this form realm practitioner is meditating. That sounded like the beginning of a joke. So the form realm meditation, that's what was said though. The form realm meditator is meditating and then recognizes, oh, I have all of these forms around me. I have all of this, contamination. I don't want to have this anymore. I must concentrate harder so I can achieve a formless state. So then they renounce the form realm, this type of being, and then that renunciation causes them to engage in concentration, which causes a formless state.
What then the Sunday going to San Lucas Zukan Zume, what then do?
So these are the differences in thinking in the different form and formless realms.
That Eden Kadu and the San could deal Karina quick thing in the W Maris. Eden Kadu can Sanction, Nakana Santan, Kunja. And Nakata is
There's some who meditate on space. They don't have any sort of idea of shape or color, and they believe that they just meditate on a space-like existence. And this is called space meditation or space familiarization. So there's levels of concentration one can reach.
Nakana the Santana, Uncle Saint Jibmene, Nashi Tais, Nakala Santana, Nashi Santana.
So then one gets to that and is not satisfied with the space concentration and then wishes to have a clairvoyant level of concentration. So then desires to achieve a higher level of concentration. These are the stages that a meditator on the stages of concentration would go through. So, but this is all according to karma and actions. This is all forced and produced by karma and actions. So it cannot be produced if the actions have not taken place to create this potential. So then once the desire to be free from all of that takes place, then the renunciation can take place, or the desire to be liberated, to achieve liberation is there. I have no idea. Yanjir Suranang. Yanjir Temchi. Gangesina the Sopo Lago.
Tama Zubu bigger, tall, Zat Chiburis. Tama Chichin. Tamagal Hachawa Tuzuki, and Kambas Umarbe. Kamba Jing Azun Zamil Shumaris.
Ale. Okay. Even beings who have reached the peak of cyclic existence recognize that they're at the peak, they're at the highest point, but they're still within that. They're on top of cyclic existence.
Who's the being that understands this?
The Su Xinglu.
This is the how Omal Hatama to setting a yoris, Zubucha yoris, Zuburinga yoris, Titama delirium, the she yoris.
So these beings strive for bigger and bigger things, but they eventually reach the peak of cyclic existence, the last level of the highest place that one can abide in cyclic existence. So these various different kinds of gods traverse these levels and become bigger and bigger, and have greater sized bodies and so forth. But it's said they're sitting on the peak. It's stated it's like sitting on the world, or sitting on the peak of cyclic existence.
Would they assert from a wrong perspective that was a permanent existence?
Khensur the Tama, Khensur Tsampa Tapa Yimba Mitapa Yimba.
Mataba, Hayin Mataba in Charis.
No, Khensur the Kelangudu, Gari Kelan. Kashi Kelan Tapa, Kashi Kelan Mitapa.
That Shabbat Navaris. Shuribazuki Gunja and the Santan just on the Tapatoris, Tapat the Nijuman the Jaguars. Santan the Zumel just on the Tabaris, the Lovaris. Namba Jina to Taba Malda, Tanda to Kui Neres, later Yomo, Lay Nevazus on the Masa Muris.
So it depends on who's asking the question. Within a non-Buddhist tradition, the belief is that once one reaches certain levels of concentration, that this is actual liberation or nirvana. So these beings believe that they are liberated at this point. But as Buddhists, we don't believe that they're liberated. We believe that they've been freed. We believe that they are in cyclic existence still, caused by karma and afflictions, and that this is not a nirvana or a true cessation.
Gods like Indra.
Yes.
We know if we have bodhicitta.
The Shanchu Jesem Yuna Kandre Hakogudu.
Shanchu Sen Shanchu Sen Jul just on the Nasuda Mandawas, you are Senko Kensa. Jen Sanamatu, so Rajan Viji Chanos, Sab Choice, and Jen Shambat and Hindu.
So it's only for oneself to know. You can't tell what others have or don't have, but one would know they had it if the grasping at self-cherishing attitude was completely disintegrated, and the desire to cherish others was the only thought that was there. Once one destroys the self-cherishing attitude and achieves the attitude that wishes to care for others, or cherish others, then that would be an indicator that bodhicitta has arrived. It's okay. That's it. So there was this monk on a mountain. The sixth Dalai Lama came up. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient living beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of the Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Lai mu ni ju ji me non ram ri ra lin ji ni ne nyen ba ni san ye ji nu mi de o ai ro nan na ji lan ju ba jon da gi ji ne sa be ge wa di den dan dro wa kun la gam ben dan je ba je tsun lo zan dra ba yi tempe nim po rin du ze de jo idam guru ratna mandalakam niratayami. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri, likewise Samantabhadra as well. Whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Jambe bawu jeda jenpa dang kondu sambo de an de jin de da gunji jesu da lo je ge wa de da tan che ra tu ngo du som she be je wa tan che yi ngo wa gan la cho tu nga pa de da jen ge we tsa wa di kun jang sampo chu chi ra tu ngo wa ni. In the heavenly realm of Tibet, surrounded by a chain of snow mountains, source of all happiness and help for beings, is Tenzin Gyatso, Chenrezig in person. May his life be secure for hundreds of kalpas. Om Ri Ra Wei Go Wei Shin Yam Ni Ben Nan De Wa Ma Lu Yong Wei Ne Chenrezig Wan Tenzin Gyatso Yi Jamezi Ne Manu Yen Yoni. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Rinpoche,
upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, a spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance.
Lo Zun Sambo Namala Yun Rin Jamban Zebe Gewe Jen Lo Nan Dong Be Den Ban Zin Jema Yen Zor Wan Da Rin Jen Jan Den Jo.
dispels the darkness obscuring the five scriptures, joyously uphold the sublime teachings of Sutra and Tantra through the three doors, through constantly applied perseverance to perfect learning and reflection. The Venerable Geshe Lharampa will remain for a long time.
Yeah. This is Diane Cook.
Yep, I'll apply for Father's Day.
Oh, good.
Share with everyone.
Other.
Thank you, Rinpoche. This is on behalf of everyone at the center.